Let's take a look at what you would see from your own backyard. Besides the sun and the moon, the obvious things, one of the first things you've learned about the sky is constellations. What's so important about constellations? For ancient people, ancient astronomers, it was a matter of life and death. You, you have to plant crops at the right time, whether or not you can tell what season it is. If you don't plant crops at the right time, they're going to die and all the villagers are going to be mad at you. In places like the Aztecs, current day Mexico, in those cultures, that region of the world, it's kind of hard to tell the seasons. The difference between summer, winter, spring, fall isn't really obvious. So they would use the sky to figure out what season it was, when it was time to plant, when certain things were. The sky was literally a calendar to them. In fact, our calendar comes from looking at the stars. In a lot of cases, it turned mystical. It was kind of weird and unusual, and what they thought of as unnatural, that there were connections between that and Earth because they're not earthly objects up there. So it's very easy to think of them as something mystical. Constellations are not anything physical. In fact, the stars themselves in a constellation can be really far apart. They just happen to make a grouping in the sky that looks, catches our attention. It's just like seeing shapes in the clouds. We look up and we see things. The human eye, the human brain is really good at distinguishing patterns. That's part of our predatory nature from the distant past. We see patterns, we recognize things, and we tend to see those patterns everywhere, clouds, etc. The brightest stars were named by ancient people. They were obvious, they were known. There's Betelgeuse. In Arabic, Betelgeuse means the armpit of Orion. Yeah. So a lot of you are fairly familiar with Orion, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Here's a fun question for you. How many stars are visible in the night sky? Even though there are well over 300 billion galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars in each, and you can actually figure this out, there's definitely more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on every beach in the world. You can only see about 3,000 to 4,000 stars with the naked eye. Most of them are just too dim to see. In 1603, astronomers came up with a formal system for naming stars, which originated in Europe, Renaissance. And here is Orion with this formal system. You can see that star on the left upper the shoulder of Orion is with the pink arrow. That is Betelgeuse. And if you look close, you can see the Greek letter alpha. So the one proper name for Betelgeuse is Alpha Orionis. It's the alpha star of Orion. It's the brightest star. And if we look around, Beta is down on the bottom right foot as we see it. So it would be Beta Orionis. But we typically really call the dimmest ones that. The constellations have all sorts of stories. I personally kind of like Orion. It's very visible. You can see the belt right there with the sword. And Orion is a hunter that was thrown up into the sky, and I don't remember the reason for it. But he's followed by his faithful faithful dog, Sirius. Sirius. And if you've read Harry Potter, you know that we're talking about Sirius Black. Wow, I should have said something about spoilers. Sorry. Sirius is known as the dog star. It's the star that follows Orion through the nighttime sky. Sirius is the brightest star visible on Earth, not counting the sun, of course, because it's a star. So if you go back to Harry Potter, Sirius, the dog star, gave something away ahead of time. She does that in a lot of her books. I don't know all of them, but I know that one. Every culture is going to put their own ideas and beliefs into what they see. I might look at a picture of something and go, wow, that looks, like Michael Jackson, because, the 80s. You would look at something more recent and say, wow, that looks like Lady Gaga. Yeah, okay, sure. Well, I guess if we're comparing, I'd say Madonna and Lady Gaga. We would see different things because we've got just slightly different cultures. But imagine very different cultures are going to see very different. One constellation that you've probably seen before is Pleiades. Most of the time, when I point it out to people, they say, wow, is that the Little Dipper? It's actually not. When you first look at it, it's fairly easy to see four stars and a little something off to the side. You think of it as a dipper. It's actually six visible stars. This is a zoomed in view. So we have this first one on the left, and then we've got four that make a square, and then there's a little one off to the side there, and another one, let's see, four, five, six. Yeah. So I always have to look at it. Pleiades, through ancient times, has frequently been an eye test. Only the best warriors could see all six stars and describe that. So, again, you can see more stars in this picture because it's a telescope view. The interesting thing is the ancient Greeks, yes, I said six stars, called them the seven daughters of Atlas. They were put up in the sky for some reason. I can't remember what. I want to say they were put up there because Orion kept chasing them and they put them up there for protection. And then one of the other Greek gods was, I'll get you, and stuck Orion up there, and now he chases them through the night sky for eternity. Um, there's stories of why are there only six stars if there's seven daughters? And I've heard everything from, one of them got dimmer and you can't see it anymore, but the ancient Greeks could. All sorts of things, that there's dust getting in the way of one of the stars. But history kind of shows that there were always six stars visible, and the ancient Greeks really loved the number seven, so they had to put it up in the sky, even though it wasn't there. The Polynesians had one of the gods put a star up there, and it was so bright. One of the other gods hated it because it was so bright and bragging all the time, so he smashed it into six pieces. In Japan, they recognize it as six stars, and they have a different name for Pleiades. Of course, the Polynesians did too. In Japan, that constellation is called Subaru. And if you look at it, Subaru has that one big star off on the top left. That's the furthest star on the left. They just moved it over towards the center to make it look a little bit better. But the Subaru logo is Pleiades, just with one star moved a little bit. So that's kind of cool. Here's a fun one. Just a side story. I got to go see a rocket launch at NASA through what was then called a NASA Tweet Up. They're now called NASA Socials, where they invited 300 people down to watch the rocket launch and take a tour. You had to pay for your own stuff and transportation and hotel. But I was one of the people chosen to go down there, and Neil deGrasse Tyson was our celebrity guide for that trip. And we were at the causeway at NASA to see the rocket launch, and we had to meet at the bus at like 4:30 in the morning to get out onto the causeway. And while everybody's waiting, I noticed there's like a crowd of people between the buses. So I kind of wandered over, and Neil deGrasse Tyson had his green laser pointer out and was telling stories. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is the first one to tell me about the group about Subaru, and went on and looked it up later, and it was kind of cool. So whenever I think of that night, I swear I can smell diesel fuel, the fumes, because we were sitting there in the diesel fumes of the bus and just gathered around him. And he's a great storyteller, really cool person to meet if you ever get to. Okay, there's a little something in astronomy, a measurement called magnitude. Magnitude refers to the brightness of a star. Originally, they had six classes, one being the brightest and six being the faintest. That is usually opposite of what most people think, so careful on a test or quiz, hint, hint. So the larger the magnitude, the brighter the star. I'm sorry, the dimmer the star. I mixed it up. Once we invented telescopes, they allow us to see magnitudes greater than 6. Hubble telescope can see images of magnitude of approximately 28, which is just ridiculously dim. For comparison, our sun is so bright it's a negative value of about negative 26.5. I believe the moon is about negative 13. So these are what are called apparent visual magnitudes. This is what we see from Earth. Some of those stars are very, very bright because they're close, and some dim stars could naturally be much brighter, so their actual visual magnitude is very high, but because they're so far away, they appear to be dim, and we would say it's got an apparent low visual magnitude. Okay, that's it for notes on constellations.